Oh, you're here. I guess it's time to get started. So, welcome to Esoteric Enigmas, where we'll be talking about various mysterious phenomena throughout the world. This week, we will discuss the Bermuda Triangle. Between Bermuda, Miami, and Puerto Rico, there's a region of ocean called the Bermuda Triangle. It covers an area of 500,000 square miles of water, though not everyone agrees on the borders, and some claim it covers up to 1.5 million square miles. The most commonly accepted corners of the triangle are in Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. For hundreds of years, the area has seen the disappearances of hundreds of ships and planes. Even some people on land have supposedly gone missing due to the triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the first paranormal stories I heard as a child. I remember watching documentaries about it with my father. The idea that there are mysteries still in the world intrigued me. Since then, I have watched and read much more about the triangle, UFOs, and other topics. So for this inaugural episode of this series, I thought I would start with some disappearances in the triangle. There were so many cases about the triangle that we could have looked into. I considered the Star Tiger and Star Ariel, but I couldn't find much about them. I also considered Flight 19, but there's so much I could talk about it might need to be its own episode. In the end, I picked 3 ships that sounded interesting. So let's get into it. The Cyclops. Weather fair, all well, was the last message sent by the USS Cyclops, a Proteus-class cargo ship used by the U.S. Navy. It was sent on March 4th, 1918. She was never seen or heard from again after that. The ship was launched on May 7th, 1910 from Philadelphia. She was 522 feet long, 65 feet wide, and weighed 19,360 tons, and had 2 steam-powered propellers. The Cyclops carried a complement of 236 officers and enlisted men. About a year after the U.S. entered the First World War, the Cyclops was sent to Brazil for ore. She set out from Rio de Janeiro on February 16, 1918, and headed for Baltimore, Maryland, with a stop in Salvador, Brazil. She was loaded with over 10,000 long tons of manganese ore. However, her maximum load was just 8,000 long tons. Manganese was used, and still is used, in steelmaking. It is an ingredient in stainless steel and Hatfield steel, which was used to make combat helmets for the war. Before leaving port, Commander George W. Worley submitted a report that her starboard engine had a cracked cylinder and was not operative. A later telegram from the U.S. consul in Barbados reported that one of her engines was in poor condition. The Cyclops made an unscheduled stop in Barbados. The water level was above the pencil line, a marking on the ship showing its maximum load. She set out again on March 4th, still headed for Baltimore. However, that was the last anyone would ever see of her. On April 15th, 1 month after the ship was overdue, the newspapers published the headline, "Feared Lost." On June 1st, Assistant Secretary of the Navy Franklin D. Roosevelt declared her lost at sea, with her 309 crew and passengers, including 73 sailors and Marines returning home, and the U.S. Consul General Alfred Luis Moreo Gottschalk. To this day, no wreckage of the ship has ever been found. She just sailed into the Bermuda Triangle and disappeared. Or did she? There have been numerous theories about what happened to her. The first is that she was captured or sunk by German U-boats. The U.S. had entered the war a year earlier, so the Germans had motive to hurt the war effort. But German authorities after the war denied any involvement. Others think that she sank in an unexpected storm. That was possible, but they never called for help, and there was no wreckage to confirm this theory. Even without the wreckage, there are clues to what could have happened. The Cyclops was carrying manganese ore, something it did not normally carry. Lieutenant Harvey Forbes, the ship's executive officer, had experience handling this cargo. However, he had been confined to quarters for some trivial infraction, according to Conrad Nerving, a sailor who had disembarked from the Cyclops in Rio de Janeiro. Because Forbes was confined to quarters, an inexperienced officer was in charge of loading. Manganese is difficult to transport. The inexperienced officer could have fit the load in just 2 or 3 of her cargo holds. This would have put extra stress on certain sections of the hull instead of having the weight spread across the entire ship. And remember, the ship was carrying an extra 2,000 long tons. The stress to the overloaded holds could have split the ship, and it would have sunk before they could have sent out an SOS. Or the ship could have been hit by a rogue wave, and the improperly stowed cargo could have slid, rolling the ship over and sinking. But their last message did say that the weather was fair. Without finding the wreckage, we may never know the truth. And we might never find that wreckage. According to officers and crews that served with him, Commander Worley was a subpar navigator. Nervig also noted that when arriving at Salvador, they sailed in from the north. This means that Worley passed the city and had to turn around to make port. Other captains have also reported having found Worley off course and had to point him back to where he should be. So he could have gotten off course when the ship sank. Right now it might be sitting on the seafloor as much as 100 miles from where it should have been. The Ellen Austin. In 1881, a 210-foot-long Ellen Austin filled with immigrants was sailing from London to New York. All sources say that her route passed through the Bermuda Triangle, though they don't explain why its path was so far south. Captain A. J. Griffin, though some sources name him Baker or Garrick, saw another ship, a schooner, traveling near them. He tried for 2 days to make contact with the other ship, but they never responded. Finally, he and his crew boarded the seemingly abandoned ship. There were no signs of anyone else on board, no signs of violence, and the ship was in good shape. And it was loaded with supplies. They had no idea why the crew had abandoned her. Captain Griffin assigned a small crew to the other ship and had them follow the Austin to port. For 2 days, all was smooth sailing. Then the storm struck and the ships got separated. The storm lasted for a few days. Once it had passed, Griffin searched for the other ship. They eventually found her drifting aimlessly. The captain took out his spyglass and scanned the other deck. Once again, there was no signs of anyone on board. At this point, the accounts diverge. One version is that his crew was too scared to board the other ship. In the second version, Griffin was able to convince another crew to go over with the promise of profits from selling the ship and cargo. They were well armed, and the ship would remain side by side with the Austin throughout the night. That night, a dense fog rolled in, so thick that the crew of the Ellen Austin could not see the lanterns on the schooner. However, they could hear a bell that the other crew rang throughout the night, until it suddenly stopped. The crew of the Ellen Austin rang their bell, but there was no reply. In the morning, when the fog lifted, there was no sign of the schooner or the crew. A third version was on a show about the Bermuda Triangle that I saw, and at the Ellen Austin had a rope tied to the schooner so that they would not get separated. The fog rolled in during the night, but the rope was still taut. In the morning, when the fog was burned away, someone touched the rope and it suddenly went slack, and they saw that the schooner was gone. However, I think this version was just exaggerated for television. In fact, there is doubt about the entire story. The Ellen Austin was a real ship. She was built in 1834 in Maine, and plied the waters between England and New York, though she made a few stops in San Francisco over the years. Originally it was captained by William Garrick, but he was replaced in 1874 by Griffin. Then in 1893 the ship was wrecked. Lloyd's of London, a firm that has insured ships for hundreds of years, does have a record of the Ellen Austin. However, it does not have any casualty listings for this time period. Nor is there any newspaper article about the incident. The first written mention of the story is in the 1943 book The Stargazer Talks by Rupert Gould. Gould claims he had heard the story from sailors and it had been passed down from one person to the next. While it is an interesting tale, there is no real evidence to support it. There's a saying that I think applies here. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The witchcraft. It was a clear evening on December 22nd, 1967. Dan Barak, a hotel owner, and Father Patrick Horgan cruised through Miami Harbor in Barak's 23-foot cabin cruiser, the Witchcraft. Father Horgan had visited Barak and his wife and kids for dinner. After dinner, Barak had invited the father to go and view the Christmas lights from the sea. They were only going out a short distance and take in the panorama of Miami's festive skyline. They sailed out of the harbor through Government Cut, apparently heading for Buoy 7, the first buoy about a mile from the end of Government Cut. Their plan was to stop their engines by the buoy and enjoy the view. About 9 p.m., Barak called the Coast Guard to ask for assistance. He was calm and said that he had hit something and would need a tow back to the marina. He said it was not an emergency. Based on the call, the Coast Guard understood that whatever had hit him likely damaged the propeller or rudder, but had not damaged the hull. Barak said that they were anchored by Buoy 7, and the Coast Guard asked them to send up a flare to make sure that the tug could find their exact position. Even though Barak said by Buoy 7, how close were they really? None of the sources I found specify if they were anchored by the buoy, tied to it, or if they just cut their engines somewhere inside of the buoy. The Coast Guard sent out a ship to tow them, and they reached the spot 19 minutes after Barak's call. But there was nothing there. There had been no signs of a flare, no other calls to say that the situation had gotten worse. No debris or life jackets were floating in the water. A 1,200 square mile search was launched that night. The Coast Guard requested private vessels as far as Bimini, 50 miles away, to assist. They sailed up the Gulf Stream in case the Witchcraft had gotten carried away. On December 28th, the search was called off after searching 24,500 square miles of water without turning up any clues. The Coast Guard had officially given up, and their final statement said, "They are presumed missing, but not lost at sea." The Witchcraft was constructed with built-in flotation to make it unsinkable. The hull was filled with a gel that would keep the ship above water if it flooded. The Coast Guard frequently has to scuttle ships that have been floundered and have built-in flotation because they're hazards to other ships. Barak was a veteran sailor and was big on safety and had plenty of life jackets and other survival gear. When the Coast Guard asked him to send up a flare, he said he had a flare gun ready. But why was one never seen? Where did the Witchcraft go? To this day, no one knows. Did they fall through a portal to another realm? Was the entire ship taken by aliens? Did Barak and Father Horgan fake their disappearance and start a new life somewhere else? Were they on the run because of some shady business dealings? We may never know. I want to step back a moment and talk about the history of the Bermuda Triangle. Vincent Gaddis was the man who coined the term Bermuda Triangle in a 1964 article for Argosy magazine, The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. He later expanded this article into a book, Invisible Horizons. After the release of this book, other authors started writing about the mysterious sea. Among them was Charles Berlitz, the author of The Bermuda Triangle. Many other authors simply regurgitated the book. people just copied the list of missing ships and planes. Larry Kusch, a research librarian and writer, criticized Berlitz in The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved. In his book, he pointed out that the number of ships and aircraft reported missing was no greater than for any other area of the ocean. He also claimed that the number of disappearances in Berlitz's book was exaggerated. Many ships that were reported missing were later found. One ship, an ore carrier that Berlitz claimed went missing 3 days out from port, actually went missing in the Pacific Ocean. A plane that Berlitz said went missing in 1937 had really crashed off of Daytona Beach in front of hundreds of witnesses. According to Kusch, if Berlitz were to report that a boat was red, the chances of her being some other color is almost a certainty. 1/3 of American shipping travels through the Bermuda Triangle, and Lloyd's of London does not charge any more for ships that go through there. Additionally, the Coast Guard considers the Triangle to be just another stretch of water. No organization considers that 500,000 square miles of ocean to be special or mysterious. That is not to say that no ships go missing there. As we have seen so far, some ships have mysteriously disappeared. There are many explanations as to why ships and planes disappear in the Bermuda Triangle. Some of these range from portals to other dimensions, an Atlantean pyramid with a crystal on top that shoots lasers, UFOs, pockets of methane hydrates, or mud volcanoes. I do not have enough time to get into every possible explanation, but we'll cover a couple of the more mundane ones. One of the most common explanations for missing ships in the Bermuda Triangle is local weather. Many hurricanes pass through the region. Before weather satellites, ships had little warning about a hurricane's approach. A National Hurricane Center satellite specialist said, during very unstable weather conditions, the downburst of cold air from aloft can hit the surface like a bomb, exploding outwards like a giant squall line of wind and water. This is likely what happened to the Pride of Baltimore, a reproduction of a 19th century schooner, in 1986. The crew of the ship said that the wind went from 20 miles an hour to somewhere between 60 to 90 miles an hour. The wind capsized the vessel and sank it. In an area of ocean where you get a lot of storms, you can also get rogue waves, walls of water up to 100 feet tall. Various scientists have studied the subject. The tip of South Africa is prone to them, and there have been losses of many shipping vessels. People have reported magnetic anomalies in the Bermuda Triangle that interfere with compasses. Various scientists have tried to investigate these claims, but can find no evidence of them. I cannot disprove any of the above explanations. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. While I personally don't believe in the portals or laser shooting pyramids, any of the other explanations or even combination of explanations could be true. While the Bermuda Triangle makes a great story, I do not believe in it. I grew up watching documentaries about it, and I've read a few books on it. Some of the books just repeat the same material from previous books. But that's beside the point. The more I research the triangle, the less I believe. Do ships and planes mysteriously disappear there? Yes. But others have logical and plausible explanations. Other regions of the ocean with a lot of traffic also have disappearances. So the Bermuda Triangle is not unique. There is the Devil's Triangle by Japan, the Bass Straits Triangle by Australia, the Nevada Triangle, the Great Lakes Triangle, just to name a few. Some of these warrant their own episodes, and I'll probably also make a Bermuda Triangle Part 2. I've told you the facts as I can find them and my own thoughts, but each of you is welcome to come to your own conclusion. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe for more videos.